to my channel. Today I have another what's for dinner video to share with you. I have tons of super easy meal ideas. They're all very budget friendly and family friendly, so I know your whole family is going to love them. And if you're new here, consider hitting that little red subscribe button. I do upload these videos every single Sunday, so if you don't want to miss out, make sure you are subscribed to my channel. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the meals for the week. So to start off this week for dinners, I'm going to be making some Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches. If you have been craving some Chick-fil-A, this is the perfect recipe for you. I am just taking one large chicken breast and pounding it down. I do not have a meat mallet, so I'm just using a rolling pin. You could also slice the chicken breast in half to make it nice and thin. Either way works just fine. I will say I probably should have pounded mine a little bit thinner. The chicken was a little bit hard to cook all the way through, but they did end up coming out really, really good. And then I'm just adding probably about half a cup or so of pickle juice into this bowl. And then these are actually gonna go in the fridge for about an hour, and you're just gonna let them marinate in there. And then once my chicken had been marinating for about an hour, I am just getting the breading ready. You're gonna need 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar, half a teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, half a teaspoon of chili powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and half a teaspoon of baking powder. And then if you want them to be a little bit on the spicier side, you can go ahead and add in some cayenne pepper. But don't worry, I'm gonna have this whole recipe linked down below, so it's nice and easy for you guys to follow. And then into a separate bowl, you're gonna be cracking 1 egg and mixing in half a cup of milk. You're gonna mix all of this together and set that aside. This is gonna be used to coat the chicken. And then before you actually coat your chicken in the flour mixture, you're gonna want to get your oil heating up. I am using vegetable oil for mine. I used probably about 3 cups or so. That's what the recipe called for, but of course I just eyeballed it. And then now I am going to actually be prepping the chicken. So you're just gonna pull the chicken right out of the pickle juice into that milk mixture and then straight into the flour mixture. And you're gonna want to give this a really nice thick coating. And you're actually gonna do this twice. So it's gonna be a really thick coating of this mixture, and it's gonna make it super nice and delicious and crispy when you go to fry it. You'll want to make sure that your oil is nice and hot before adding in your chicken, just to make sure it gets nice and crispy. My oil was honestly probably a little bit too hot because the one side got a little bit overdone, but they still turned out really, really good. I did have to cook mine for quite a while just because I had a little bit thicker chicken. If you have thinner chicken, I would say you're gonna wanna do like 4 to 5 minutes per side, but of course you're just gonna want to check the internal temperature. And then here I am just taking them out and putting them on a paper towel to let them cool off and let any of that extra grease drain off. And we all know that one of the best things about Chick-fil-A is their sauce. So of course I had to mix up a batch of that. So I am using a different recipe than I have ever used before. I will have it linked down below, but I'm just using half a cup of mayonnaise. And then I'm also going to be using some Dijon mustard. You're gonna need about a teaspoon of that. You'll also need 3 teaspoons of just regular plain yellow mustard. And I promise this doesn't have a very strong mustard flavor. I mean, you do taste it a little bit, but even if you don't like mustard, you could totally try this one out. And then I am using some barbecue sauce. I just used some Sweet Baby Ray's. The recipe called for 2 teaspoons of that, but I actually used 3 because I really love the barbecue flavor. And then for a little bit of sweetness, I am using some honey. The recipe called for 2 tablespoons, but I decided to just use 1 because I didn't want mine too sweet. And then you'll also need half a teaspoon of garlic powder, as well as half a teaspoon of paprika, and you will also need a teaspoon of lemon juice. And then you're just going to mix all of this together until it's fully combined, and this is going to be the perfect topping for our sandwiches, or if you have fries or something on the side, this would be absolutely perfect for that too. I did end up keeping the leftovers in the fridge for a couple days, and they were so good on so many different things. So this sauce is definitely a winner in my book. And then I decided to toast up some buns, so I decided to just put a little bit of butter on top, and then I just popped those into the air fryer for a couple of minutes, and then I'm serving everything up. I have the bun with the chicken, and of course I did that sauce on top, and then I just served it with some broccoli on the side. This was honestly a super delicious meal. If you want some Chick-fil-A and you don't want to go out and get it, definitely recommend this recipe. It was really delicious and also really affordable. Next up, I am making a sausage and rice skillet. This was a new recipe and I absolutely loved it. It had so much flavor and my kids ate it really well. So if you have kids, this might be something that they enjoy. But I am just starting off by making some rice in my Instant Pot. So I added in 1 1/4 cup of brown rice with half a teaspoon of salt. And then here I'm adding in 1 1/2 cups of water. And I do like to add in a little bit of olive oil as well. I feel like it helps the rice not stick together. And then I just pressure cook it for about 18 minutes. And then when it's all done, I do a natural release for 10 minutes. While the rice is cooking, I am just prepping my veggies. So here I'm chopping up about half of a large white onion. That's just what I had left over in the fridge. I feel like you want to use about half of a large one, or a small onion would be perfect. I will have this recipe linked down below if you want to follow the directions there. And I pretty much followed the directions on this one. So that is exactly what I did in the recipe. And then for the pepper, I did not have the red pepper, so I just ended up using a whole yellow pepper, and I'm just chopping that up as well. When it comes to sausage, you can go ahead and use whatever you prefer, what you have on hand. I'm actually just using some venison sausage. We have so much of this to use up. It's just like a Polish type of sausage, and it actually tasted really good in this recipe, but go ahead and use whatever you have on hand. I have this all in my pot, and I'm just adding in a little bit of olive oil, and I'm going to be cooking it over medium heat. I probably cooked it for about 5 minutes or so. I did make sure that the meat was cooked all the way through and that the onions and the peppers were nice and soft. And then towards the last minute or so, I'm adding in a big scoop of minced garlic. I'm also seasoning it up with about half a teaspoon of black pepper, as well as half a teaspoon of sea salt. And then I just let that cook together for a couple more minutes while that garlic warms up a little bit. And then here I'm actually adding in about 4 or 5 tablespoons of tomato paste. Little tip for you, if you ever open a can, just freeze the rest of it and you will have it for later. And then here is 3/4 of a cup of chicken broth. I added in about half of that, and then you'll add in the other half later on. And then I'm just letting the tomato paste and the chicken broth all heat up. The seasoning in this recipe was absolutely perfect and super simple. I'm just adding in a teaspoon of paprika, and then the recipe actually called for cayenne pepper, but I did chili powder instead because I didn't want it to be too spicy, so I added in about 1/8 of a teaspoon of chili powder, and then I'm adding in the rice that I had cooked up from earlier. Like I said before, I am using brown rice, but you could definitely use white rice or whatever type of rice you like for this one. And then you're also going to be adding in the rest of the chicken broth from earlier. So add that in and then get everything mixed together. This recipe was super easy and delicious, and it had so much flavor, so if you need a simple and easy recipe on a budget, this is a great one for that. Next up, I am going to be making some spaghetti with some homemade Italian bread. So I'm starting off with the bread recipe. This was a super easy one, and this bread turned out absolutely amazing. So I'm going to share with you guys how I made it. So I did 1 heaping teaspoon of yeast, and then 1 cup of warm water. And then I just kind of mixed that together before adding in the sugar. Next, I'm adding in about half a teaspoon of sugar, and then I'm going to mix this together and let it sit for about 5 minutes before adding in the rest of my other ingredients. Once the mixture has sat for about 5 minutes, I'm adding in 1 teaspoon of salt, and then I'm adding in about 2 cups of flour. I will be adding a little bit more later on, just depending on how much I feel like I need when I'm kneading it. I probably added about a 1/4 cup total during the kneading process, and I do just go ahead and knead it in my mixer. I'm gonna have this recipe linked down below. I did have the recipe, but I will have the original linked down below, but I definitely recommend this recipe. It was super good and really easy to put together. And then I just put this dough right into an oiled bowl. I just used a little bit of olive oil, and then I covered it up with a towel and let it rise for about an hour until it was doubled in size. After about an hour, the dough had doubled in size, so I am just getting ready to shape it into a loaf. So I sprayed my pan with a little bit of olive oil, and then I'm just shaping this into a classic style of an Italian loaf. So it's just long and skinny. Of course, you really could shape this however you wanted to, but this is the way to do it for Italian style bread. And then you're going to let it sit for another half an hour or so, and then it will be ready to put in the oven. You're going to just take a knife and cut a few slits right on top. And then once you're done with that, you're going to put this into a 400-degree oven for right around 20 to 25 minutes. The top should be a little bit golden brown. And then when you pull it out, you're going to put a little bit of melted butter on top. And that is it for this super easy Italian bread. Just slice it up, serve it with butter. You could make it into garlic bread, add different flavors to it, but it was seriously so good. It was nice and kind of crispy on the outside, and then the inside was super soft and delicious. As for the spaghetti, I kept this super simple. I just have some brown ground beef, and then I'm adding in this tomato and basil sauce. I'm just adding in a full jar of that. And then I'm also adding in some petite taille tomatoes. If you don't like chunks in your spaghetti, you could totally add in tomato sauce or something, but that is what I like. And then I'm just seasoning this up to my liking. I did some salt and pepper, some onion powder, some garlic powder, parsley, Italian seasoning. You can add literally whatever you want, but then I do like to add a little bit of sugar at the end just for a little bit of extra sweetness to cut some of the acidity from the tomatoes. And then I just served this sauce over some spaghetti noodles with the broccoli and Italian bread on the side, and this was a super easy and delicious meal. Next up, I am just making some sour cream chicken enchiladas. We absolutely love this recipe, and I have made it before, but it was super good, so I decided to make it again. I'm just preheating my oven to 400 degrees to start off, and then I'm cutting up 1 large onion. I'm going to be throwing that right into my pan where I'm going to saute it. I'm just drizzling a little bit of olive oil on top of these onions, and then I did add a little bit of salt and pepper for some extra flavor. And then I'm just going to be cooking these until they are translucent in color. And then I'm heading over to start working on the chicken. I actually just cooked my chicken in the Instant Pot. I just think it's so easy that way. And I always take my hand mixer and shred it up just like this. If you guys have never tried using a hand mixer, I've talked about this before, but it is seriously the best way to make shredded chicken. Of course, you could use chunked up chicken or cube chicken for this recipe, but I really think shredded is best for this particular one. And then right into that shredded chicken, I'm just adding in all of those nice cooked onions. I'm also adding in a little bit of dried parsley. I'm sorry, I don't have a measurement on this, probably about half a teaspoon or something. You're just gonna wanna add it to taste. And then I'm also adding in about a cup of regular sour cream. I'm also adding in about a third of my can of enchilada sauce. I will say this sauce was a little bit too spicy for our family. I used a different brand last time and I definitely prefer that one. So just check what sauce you're using to make sure it's not too spicy, and then give all of that a good mix. And then we're going to be adding in some shredded cheese. I am just using some Colby and Monterey Jack. I would say added probably about a cup into this mix. And then of course we're going to be adding some sauce and cheese on top of our enchiladas as well. I don't know what it is about me and enchiladas, but I always forget to add a little bit of sauce onto the bottom of the pan. So make sure you add a little bit of sauce first before you put the enchiladas in there. But I am just filling these up with the good old chicken mixture, wrapping them up, and then putting them right into my casserole dish. And then this is where I was talking about that I forgot to put the sauce on the bottom, so I ended up having to pull all of my enchiladas out, put the sauce in there, and then re-put the enchiladas back on top. And then once you have everything in there, you're going to be topping these with a little bit of the enchilada sauce and the cheese, and these are going to go right into the oven. I do like to cover mine up with some tin foil, and then these are going to go into the oven for about 20 to 30 minutes, just depending on your oven. And then I do like to pull the tin foil off for the last 10 minutes or so to give them a little bit more color. Well, that is it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it and that it gave you some meal ideas and inspiration for your week. If you are new here and you don't want to miss out on any more What's for Dinner videos, make sure you're subscribed because a new one comes out every single Sunday. But that is it for today's video. I will talk to you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.